Hello, everyone. Enjoy. Being a relatively young and shy person, I've started using dating apps to help me meet more people and hopefully find a lasting relationship. I struggle with putting myself out there, especially in public with people I've never met. So apps like Tinder are great for me to get comfortable talking with someone before actually meeting them in person. For reference, I'm a female in my early 20s, and I had been using Tinder for a little over a year at the time. Most of my interactions up until this point had been fine, usually either ending up dating for a couple months or just becoming friends. All of the breakups were mutual and had no hard feelings. Anyway, this began a couple months after my last relationship. I was talking to a guy who I will call Peter to respect their privacy. We talked for about 2 weeks on Tinder. From our back and forth texting, he seemed like a nice, somewhat shy person. But part of me liked that because I was shy as well. Eventually, he asked me out on a date, and we met up at a local restaurant later that week. Upon meeting him in person, nothing seemed off at first. One of my biggest fears is that they'll look nothing like they did in the pictures, but Peter didn't look any different, and he was just as soft-spoken as he was over text. Our conversation at dinner that night was really awkward, though. He barely spoke and kept looking around. Well, I'm not a big talker either, but I was trying really hard to get him to open up a bit, but he would give simple one-word answers. At one point, he even left the table, saying he forgot something in his car and didn't come back for almost 15 minutes, leaving me there alone. So of course, when dinner was done with, I kindly told him that I didn't feel a great connection and didn't want to continue further in a relationship with him. He stood quietly and nodded, then walked to his car. I felt bad, but it is what it is, I guess. I got in my car and headed home. That night, I thought about Peter a few times, feeling weird now that I didn't have anyone to text. But I sat down and turned on a movie to clear my mind. It was nearly 11 p.m. when I heard soft footsteps coming up to my front door and stopping. I muted the TV and turned to face the door, still sitting on the couch. I was tired, but I knew I had heard someone. 30 seconds of anticipation went by before a few loud knocks banged on the door. It startled me, even though I was half expecting it. I got up and looked through the peephole, and to my surprise at the time, Peter was standing there. I cracked open the door just a little and stuck my head out. What are you doing here, Peter?" Peter looked at me, then turned away for a moment, looking around. This made me feel really uneasy, and I just shut the door and locked it, hoping he'd get the hint to leave my property. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps departing towards the driveway and a car turning on and leaving. I checked the window to make sure he was gone, then sat back on the couch. I think I was just too tired to realize the shock of the moment, but it wasn't until I sat back down that I realized that I had never given Peter my address. A really bad feeling surged through my body, and I went to check the window again to be safe. I didn't necessarily feel in danger at this point, but just worried that Peter may have something wrong with him and had grown too attached to me. I went to bed not long after and slept well through the night. In the morning, I made coffee and breakfast, and due to the cold, snowy weather, I stayed inside most of the day. It wasn't until I was bringing the trash out to the road that I noticed a set of footprints around the side of the house. I started following them. They went around both sides of the house and right up to the gate to the backyard, then off to the road. I tried to rethink what happened last night, but I was sure I heard Peter only walk up to the door and not around the house. So these footprints had to have been from the middle of the night while I was sleeping. Standing in my living room now, I was getting extremely uncomfortable and nervous. I know it sounds dumb, but my social anxiety was really trying to look for every reason not to call 911. At that time, though, I'm very thankful that my panic overtook my anxiety and got me to call the police. This decision is very likely what saved my life. Holding my phone after talking to a dispatcher, I stared at the ground and took deep breaths to keep my head straight. I'd never dealt with something like this, so my mind wasn't prepared to handle the stress. But as I stood there trying to calm my head, I heard footsteps in the snow outside the living room window. I'm not sure what else to describe how I felt other than just completely scared. The footsteps stopped outside the window and I began to back up slowly, trying to get to the kitchen. Then came a slight scraping sound, likely a knife being wedged between the window, trying to pry it open. I screamed bloody murder, which was an unfortunate reaction from the terror of it. Immediately, the footsteps ran around to the side of the house, followed by the forceful sound of the gate breaking open. I grabbed the first knife I saw in the kitchen and sprinted upstairs. Turning the corner, though, I saw a glimpse of Peter outside the glass back door, trying to force it open. I locked myself in the bathroom, crying and clutching onto the kitchen knife as I listened to the harsh banging, scraping, and beating on the back door. It honestly sounded like a bear trying to claw and smash its way inside. This went on for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, which felt like forever. I thought of all the horrible things he planned on doing when he made his way inside, making me even more emotional. But then, a knock at the front door overcame the sound of the banging at the back door, which immediately stopped. An officer called out, and I ran straight to the front door. While Peter had run off, they were able to find him pretty quickly, and he admitted to his crimes, though he gave little reasoning for doing them. He truly just seemed crazy and unstable. It's terrifying to think how this happened from seemingly meeting up with a normal, friendly guy. This whole thing has given me terrible trust issues, and I stopped using dating apps. One of the scariest things was that the back door was almost completely destroyed, barely hanging on by the latch. Likely, if the police had shown up just minutes later, Peter would have made it inside, and who knows what he would have done if he had gotten to me. I broke things off of my ex a few years ago. He became a reckless person, unable to hold a job or any responsibilities, so it just didn't work out. Even being the person he was, though, I never thought he would do something like this. The few months after the breakup were quiet and peaceful. I was enjoying my single life, just going through the days. One night, though, I was driving back home from work, later than usual, and as I pulled into the driveway, I saw a man wearing all black standing outside a window on the left side of my house as if they were trying to look inside. This was obviously really creepy, and I pulled back out of the driveway and parked further down the road, calling the police. I waited for them to show up. Then, once they informed me that whoever it was had left, I was able to go inside. They asked if I had any idea who it could have been, but at the time, I said no. Again, I never thought of my ex as that kind of person, and there was nobody else I thought it could be. The next week went by without any problems as well, though I made sure all the windows were locked every night. One morning, though, I woke up to the sound of movement outside my bedroom window. It sounded like an animal moving around in a bush, though my immediate thought was of that man I'd seen peering through the windows last week. I jumped out of bed and put some clothes on. The blinds were covering the windows, so I knew nobody could see anything. But now I felt the need to see for myself if somebody was there or not. I didn't want to call the police again just because a squirrel was hanging out in the bush, so I pulled the blinds open. Nothing. I leaned my head closer to the window so I could see down the side of the house, and still, nobody was there. I sighed, immediately feeling safer, and continued about my morning as usual, then went off to work. Getting home rather late again, I was exhausted and cooked up a small dinner, then watched a bit of TV before deciding to go to bed early. I got up and walked down the hallway toward my bedroom, but in the corner of my eye, I saw something horrifying. The window was open, just a small crack at the bottom, but I knew I had kept it locked, so either way, someone had broken it. I walked over and looked at it from up close, then pushed it shut. The latch that was used to lock it was gone, as if it had been ripped away. I felt trapped and scared, like I wasn't even in my own home anymore. I knew I had to call the police, but I began to fear making noise as the possibility of someone being in my house became more prevalent in my mind. I was just standing there for I don't know how long, listening to the silence of the house, before the sharp, sudden sound of my phone beeping made me shiver. I pulled it out of my pocket quickly, and immediately my stomach dropped. It was a text from my ex asking how I was doing. I stared at it, just in shock and trying to piece it together in my mind. Was this just a huge coincidence? Or was it not a coincidence at all? Was he watching me right now? Fear was taking over my body. I looked around frantically, shoving myself in a corner of the room so nobody could sneak up behind me. Then another text came in. He said, "We need to talk." I was trying to hold in my tears as I turned my phone on silent. I started making my way slowly to the front door. As I approached, I turned the knob and tried to open it quietly, though it made a rather loud creak. Immediately, a loud thump came from behind the door to my bedroom. I threw the front door open and sprinted outside and down the road. I hid on the side of a neighbor's house and called the police. They actually made it pretty quickly, and I walked over to my driveway when they arrived. After 2 officers went in, they came out a minute later holding my ex and dragging him into their car. He was pleading, saying he just wanted to talk to me and that he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he wasn't going to do anything other than talk to me. Unsurprisingly, though, he had a knife shoved in his pocket. That was hopefully the last time I'll ever see or hear from him again. Obviously, I don't believe that he just wanted to talk, but that was the story he stuck with, so I'll never know what he was actually trying to do. But him waiting in my bedroom like that with a knife, I know I was lucky to get out as safely as I did. A lot of people have ex-boyfriend or girlfriend stories, but mine was actually just a friend. I'm going to call him Brian, just to keep everything private. We had met my junior year of high school through a mutual friend and had become pretty close relatively fast. We didn't go to the same school as he lived about a half hour away from me, but we hung out every weekend, got food, drove around, and just talked. Sometimes we'd go to concerts and parties together too. I'd say we were each other's best friend for a really long time. He's always been a bit weird though. He'd text me all the time, and I mean sometimes 6 or 7 times in a row if I didn't respond quickly enough. But I knew he had a lot going on in life. Or so I thought. Me and the mutual friend who introduced us, Holly, were talking one night and she said she thought he might have been lying about some pretty serious stuff. He had told both of us when we first met that his sister had cancer, but when him and Holly hung out, and it was brought up, his story was different. When Holly told me this, we decided to look through his mom's Facebook, which I just recently added. His mom posts basically everything, so we really couldn't find anything. And something that big would have definitely been posted. I've never met his sister since we never really hung out at his house, but I didn't find that weird because I didn't want anyone at my house either. While talking about this, we both shared other things that seemed a bit off to us, such as him saying that he might have cancer or that he was in the hospital for a very serious reason, but then would be completely fine just a few hours later. After going through everything with each other, we couldn't believe how much of a liar he was. I felt heartbroken that someone I called my best friend would lie about such awful things. We agreed to talk to him about it and, afterward, distance ourselves from him. I wanted to talk in person, but Holly had texted him first, and that's when I was bombarded with messages. It all started with him saying he had a seizure, which, after everything, I obviously didn't really believe him. He called me so many times while I was at work that it got to be too much. I decided to call Holly and see what was happening. When I did, she said he also went crazy on her. She ended up blocking his number because it got so bad. I didn't want to just ghost him, but this behavior was honestly disturbing. I decided to text him that I didn't want to be friends with someone who lies, especially about such sensitive stuff. After that, I didn't text him anymore. I didn't block him though. I'm not sure why, but I just couldn't do it. I muted his notifications and calls, and that was that. A few more days went by of more muted calls and texts until my dad called me. He sounded really worried, asking if I was okay. I said yeah, calmly. Then I asked him why. He said that Brian called him and was asking about me, and apparently Brian told him that some pretty serious stuff happened to me. I told him to block his number and don't answer him anymore after explaining everything. It's even weirder because I don't know how he got my dad's number. Not long after that, my brother also told me that Brian messaged him on Instagram, saying he was going to hurt himself if I didn't answer him. He also texted one of my best friends all the same thing. To make everything so much worse, he said he was going to end himself the same way that my oldest brother had done. And he knew that. That was the last straw for me, and I decided to text him one more time all of my thoughts and feelings, and then I immediately blocked him after it was delivered. I thought that was the end, and for months, it was. Until one day while I was working, I saw him walk in through the front doors. My department was in the back of the store, so I could see everything. I slipped in the back and told my manager if anyone should ask, to say that I do not work there anymore. Lo and behold, he did actually ask my manager if I was there. I had to be escorted out by a coworker for the rest of the week, just to make sure he wasn't waiting in the parking lot when I got out of work. There was one night, about a month later, where his car was parked on the side of the street by my house when I got home from work. No one else was home, so I went to a friend's house for a few hours to be safe. I didn't think he would actually hurt me. I just didn't want to talk to him. Though while I didn't think he would hurt me, I also felt like I didn't really know who he truly was, which was scary. After that incident, I called his mother and told her everything. I didn't want him to stop by my house or my work anymore, and I didn't want to get the police involved. I loved his family, which made the situation really difficult. To this day, he makes fake accounts on sites to try and talk to me, or requests to follow me. It happens maybe twice a year. I know he's not mentally there, and I truly wish that he'd heal, but I want to share my story and let others know that your friends can be just as toxic as any intimate partner can be. And when people show you their true colors, try not to make excuses for them. Do what's best for you and your mental health, and make sure to keep yourself safe. Years ago, I lived in Frederick, Maryland, in an apartment with two good friends. We were all college students who lived the party life. I don't really feel comfortable using their real names in this story, so I'll just call them Peter and Kevin. I will also refer to myself as John for the same reason. I work at a local restaurant, and I was returning one night from a long shift. Peter and Kevin were on the couch having a few beers and just shooting the breeze. This is the usual sight when I come home from work. I grabbed a brew and sat down to chat with my friends when they told me about the wild event that had just happened a few hours earlier.
Dude, we saw the craziest shit while you were at work.
Peter said.
Yeah, there was this weird-ass dude just dancing around in our backyard with a white long-sleeve button-down and black slacks.
Whoa, dancing? I asked.
Yeah, dude. He was doing some Michael Jackson dance moves and making weird noises.
Kevin responded. They told me they told him to leave, and he ran out of the yard in a panic. We figured it was probably just some strange weirdo, since the small city is sort of filled with those types of folks. Besides, it sounds like he didn't cause any harm other than trespassing in our backyard. A week passed, and it was a nice Friday night. Me and the boys were playing board games at our dinner table and just hanging out. We were immersed into our game when all of a sudden we heard a very creepy laugh.
What the fuck was that?
Kevin asked. The three of us ran to the back window to take a look, and there he was, dancing and moonwalking. It was a midnight on a Friday. Does he not have anything better to do? I then stepped out and asked,
Hey man, what's going on?
He responded with just singing Michael Jackson phrases over and over again. At that point, I was getting kind of freaked out. This whole thing just seemed a bit odd and honestly frightening, since we had no clue if this guy was dangerous or not. The strangest part was that he even resembled Michael Jackson a bit. He had long black hair, pale skin, and a lengthy frame.
Okay, dude, you have 10 seconds to get the fuck out of my yard or I'm gonna beat the fuck out of you.
The man ran out of our yard after that and then escaped through the side gate. We watched him run down the street and then make a right near the main road that runs through Frederick. The three of us just laughed it off and thought that he was a mentally unstable stranger messing with us. The next morning, I had stepped outside to have a cigarette. I was alone in the house since Kevin had already left for work and Peter had spent the night at his girlfriend's house. As I was staring off having my morning coffee and smoke, I noticed something laying in the yard. I went up to it and what I saw made my heart skip a beat. It was a life-size dummy of a boy. I had a sigh of relief since I thought for a moment that it might have been an actual human body. I just picked it up and laughed. This must have been placed here by that dancing weirdo from last night, I thought to myself. I just laughed and brought it inside the house. Kevin and Peter are going to get a kick out of this. I had an idea that would make both Kevin and Peter shit bricks. When they got home, I had already placed the dummy in the bathroom standing in the shower, so that one of the guys would get a good jump scare when using the restroom. I thought this was hilarious at that moment. As expected, the guys and I had a fun time pranking each other with the dummy until we used it as a home decoration. About 2 days had passed since I had found the dummy. Kevin and I were home watching a movie when all of a sudden, we heard a loud bang at the front door.
Hey, where's my little boy?
Someone asked.
I need my little boy now.
He said again. Kevin stood up and peered through the blinds out the front door window. The man from the other night was back, and he seemed pissed that we had taken his doll. He banged on the door once again, almost like a lunatic trying to break in. Okay, that's enough.
Dude, you need to chill the fuck out.
The man started stomping and began yelling even louder.
I want my little boy. You need to give him back.
This guy was a total head case. Kevin and I stepped outside to confront him.
Dude, are you drunk?
Kevin asked. The man just stood there and stared at us with a menacing look. Then he ran off into the street. I remember him stopping to do some weird dance move and running off. What the fuck? I thought to myself as I glanced over at Kevin with a confused look. This next part of the story still haunts me every time I think about it. I was at work a few days later. The restaurant was empty and slow, but this was normal during weekdays. Our hostess came up to me and told me that someone had sat down and actually requested me by my name. I had gotten excited because I thought it would be this girl that I was talking to at the time. I headed to the front, excited to see who might have wanted to see me, and to my surprise, it was him, the man from the last few nights. He was just sitting there at a table in his usual Michael Jackson-styled attire, smiling and waving at me. I went back into the kitchen and I just froze in fear. How does he know where I work? I thought to myself. I peeked back out, and for the first time I could get a good look at his face. He wasn't anyone I recognized at all. I heard him yell from across the restaurant, saying,
Oh, John, I'd like to place an order. I'd like to have my little boy back.
I got to say, this was the most embarrassing and scary thing that had probably ever happened to me. All of my coworkers were just giggling and laughing at me. One coworker asked who the person was, and I told her that he was a weird stalker who was harassing me. She asked him to leave, and he stood up and caused a scene.
You're ignorant. I want my little boy, and John has my little boy.
He then started moonwalking and left the restaurant. That's enough. This was the last straw. It was time to get this guy to fuck the hell off for good. I remembered thinking, it was so odd for a grown man who must have been in his mid-30s to have all this time to be out at almost all hours of the night, acting like a lunatic. What was even more strange was him running around with a life-size child doll, calling it his boy. Frederick has some strange folks, but this definitely takes the cake. This wasn't some cute little joke. It was really weird and beginning to become harassment. I texted the guys and I'd let them know what happened. We all agreed to give him back his creepy doll, and if he continued to come around, we'll get the police involved. When I got home that day, the first thing I did was put the dummy on the porch, and I left a note. The note basically said,
Hey, please take your boy and leave us the hell alone. If you ever come back around here, you'll seriously regret it.
Well, about an hour after leaving the dummy on the porch, I had stepped out to smoke a cigarette when I noticed it was gone. It had only been an hour, and this man must have already grabbed the dummy. However, the note that I had left him was still there on the porch. I always get an eerie feeling now because I think he's probably out in our neighborhood watching us. Years have passed, and I haven't been in that apartment for a very long time, but I always wonder what went on with that unstable man and why we were the target.